I love the Kalinago territory, I love the Kalinago people, and I really embrace my culture.
How the hell do we expect to survive as a communal society in a capitalist system?
We need to teach that history that have not been taught.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, one and all. Welcome to another week of Jael Joseph Live. So happy to have you guys join me here. If you're just logging on, be sure to share the live. As soon as you come on, this show, I tend to have a lot of these types of shows, sort of conversational shows, I call them. Infomercials, if you wish, because I think it's very important that we give everybody an opportunity to share their views, their opinions. I assume we live in a democracy, and I believe that it is our God-given right to exercise it. And this is why these shows are created, and this is why my platform can be used by anyone who sees it fit, or who feels that they have a cause that they're fighting for, and they'd like to express their views and their opinions. Um, Obviously, I embrace every single person who comes on my show, and I'm so happy that you, my viewers, you can also respect people's opinions, you can respect people's views, and you can agree to disagree at times, right? Thank you very much, guys, for joining me right here on Jael Joseph Live. Those of you on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, welcome to every single one of you. Wherever you tuned in, I see we have some folks on YouTube. Good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to encourage folks, if you ever missed any show, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. All of the shows are on my YouTube channel. At times, I add them to a playlist, so it's very easy for you to access all of the current shows. You just simply go to Jael Joseph on YouTube, and you'll be able to find all of the shows. Good evening to you, Naisha. Thank you very much, Naisha Coffee, for joining us here this evening. I truly appreciate you. Thank you very much for the love. I see the hearts. I'm sending them right back at you, girl. Right back at you. And I want to say thank you very much to every single person who's coming on. Don't forget, as soon as you log in, please share the live. This is how we can actually share the information. This is how we can be informed. I always say, it's very good to get information, because that allows us to make the proper decisions for ourselves, right? And not just for ourselves, but for the people around us, especially those we care for. I'm very happy to be having this show. A couple weeks ago, we tried to do the other side of things. So we brought in Shoma Darampo, who is the DPP, and she was also the one sitting on this case in Dominica. We'll talk a little bit about it. And this week, obviously, because I like balance. This week we're bringing in the other side of it. And we're joined this evening by Daryl Phillip. He is the president of Meridom. So we'll talk a little bit about his organization. And also we're joined by my friend, Joel Simpson, who is of Carry Flags. And we're going to be talking. We're going to be sharing here this evening. I think he's in some parts of the world. I think he's in Guyana. Guyana, who comes up with this? Yeah, he's in Guyana right now. And we're going to be talking. We're going to be sharing this evening. And tag a friend. A lot of times we sit and I say this because I was once upon a time that ignorant person. And I think you need to inform yourselves and tag your friends, or even if you don't want to tag them, share it with them, share the link with them, so they can learn, so they can. I think it's a time for learning, also a time for healing, for especially for the communities that have been affected most. And it's a time to move forward in the right direction. And I just want to welcome them both to the show for the very first time. I'm going to be bringing them on. So we have Daryl. Hello.
Hey, 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 so good to be with you.
It's great to
You're like
have.
a live wire on your show. I like that.
Well, I try to keep it jiggy, I should say. That's the word. You know, and that might be
I
an
hope I
old
can follow the lead.
jiggy might be an old word, so it might tell up my age. Right? If I say jiggy.
Oh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, welcome to you, Daryl. And
Okay,
also
thank you.
welcome to Joel, my dear friend out of Guyana. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me. We're just coming off of Guyana's 58th Independence weekend on Sunday. So we had yesterday as a holiday. So first working day back from a long weekend of fetting.
Wow,
You see the party bags?
Trust family. I bet you went to Cass. You went to Cass, right?
Of course, I went to Cass.
Mhm,
I went to Patrice last night.
mhm. Wow,
I went to 4 or
fantastic.
5 events for the Genesis Independence Carnival weekend. It's
That
the
was
launch
definitely
of
amazing.
our cricket carnival. Only thing I didn't go
Wow.
to was the Juve. So
Wow, that's fantastic. But it's nice to have you back. I know you might
thank
not
you
be
for having me.
rested. I'm very fully rested, and especially when you're getting off effects. But I'm happy that you could join us here because you represent the grand version of an organization, and we'll probably start with you first since you are like the parent organization, and then Meridom is kind of underneath your organization. So let's first of all introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and the organization that you represent.
All right. Thanks, Jael. And thanks for having us on the program to talk about this important decision and what it means for Dominica and the Caribbean. Happy to be here representing the Caribbean Forum for Liberation and Acceptance of Genders and Sexualities.
That is one long
That is the longest organizational title ever. And the
whoa.
reason for that is because we needed a name that we could translate into the 4 main languages of the Caribbean and still have the same acronym. So everybody knows us as Carry Flags.
Okay.
And we are the Pan Caribbean lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex network.
Wow.
And
That's a
yeah,
big one.
yeah. So the entire gamut of sexual and gender minorities organizations in the region. So organizations like Minority Rights Dominica are members. Yeah, I believe we have another Dominican organization that's a member, Dominica Equality Association,
Mhm.
as well. And we have members in all over the Caribbean, in the Dominican Republic and Cuba, in Suriname, in Haiti, and across the English-speaking Caribbean. Um, I am the founder and managing director of a Guyanese LGBTQ organization that is turning 21 years old next month on the 7th of June. And that's my day job. I'm the head of the organization, and I work there full time as the managing director. But in this capacity, I also sit on the steering committee, which is the governing body of Carry Flags, the Pan Caribbean LGBTIQ network. And I am one of the spokespersons, particularly on this Dominica decision and issue.
Okay. Thank you very much for this introduction. And we want to, at this time, introduce Daryl, um, who who's caused a lot of waves. Some people might say a lot of trouble, a lot of dégagement, who disrupted the system, and who fought a good fight, that I might add. So, Daryl, let us know a little bit about who you are and the organization you represent.
Well, I'm Daryl Phillip from Dominica, and our group name is Minority Rights Dominica. Minority Rights Dominica just started about 10 years ago when we realized that when we first started some advocacy in Dominica, it was about the health of the LGBT community. That time it was the MSM community, men who had sex with men.
Mhm.
And we first had to bring this situation to the fore that there were a number of gay men in Dominica that had AIDS and they were treated badly by the system. So it was a fight just to get people, first of all, to educate people about how to prevent HIV from spreading,
Mhm.
and then to represent the matter to the government, which was a big thing. I mean, the public didn't know about it, but there were some people having to go out and asking the government, well, what are you doing with all of these people that are being treated for AIDS in Dominica and being treated as if they were cows in a pasture?
Mhm.
I witnessed a time, that is when I first started my advocacy, when people were, there was a young man who got AIDS and he died. And in the afternoon, the health system went in with hazmats, took out all of the material from his room and took it out in the yard to burn it because nobody was really sure how AIDS was being spread.
Wow.
Now, it's okay for us to be surprised now, but at that time, people didn't know much better.
Mhm.
HIV was a mystery,
Mhm.
and they were doing the best that they could with the best information that they had.
Mhm.
But at the same time, people were going to the hospital and people were being treated as if they had leprosy and everything like that. And the situation just wasn't really right. So we had somebody had to push to get those things out. Anyway, long story short, that happened for about 7, 8 years. And then the Ministry of Health formed a special unit called the HIV AIDS Coordinating Unit that is still out there.
Yes.
And then they started distributing
Anyway.
condoms and teaching about safer sex and things like that. And
Mhm.
then they started about testing and self-testing and things like that. But then that brought up a new problem. That even if the Ministry of Health were dealing with the health issues of people who contracted HIV and AIDS, they were not dealing with the situation of a certain segment of the society, which was the LGBT, that were being treated like as if they were unapprehended criminals, which they were in effect.
Mhm.
So we decided that was against people's human rights, and we couldn't continue to allow that to happen. And
Mhm.
thus the formation of Meridom, and Meridom has been working towards that for the last years. And Meridom was not just started just to represent the LGBT community, but for human rights of minorities.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the problems that we have in Dominica is not necessarily about a certain set of people being treated differently, but it's about human rights, people respecting people's human rights.
Mhm.
And so, even if we are started off of this case, where we brought the government to, when we asked the government to please explain to us why they kept a law that criminalized people because of same-sex relationships that had nothing to do with anybody. And we asked them what was the crime, and nobody could answer us. And they treated us as if they were speaking down to us and things like that. So we said, well, we didn't have to. The only point that we could get recourse is to take it to the courts. And we
Wow.
were invited to take it to the courts. So we did. I mean,
Wow.
we reached as far as the cabinet, having a meeting with the cabinet to decide on all of this. And mind you, while we were having the meeting, the people understood what is it we were talking about, what the problems that we were sharing.
And
But
I want to stop you for a second, Daryl, because I like the fact that you say people, because for the most part, which is why I encourage folks to share the live, right? Because this is a way that you can learn, and a lot of times, like I was ignorant too, right? And I have people that I know in my life who are ignorant too, right? And I think with a lack of information, we tend to think that everything is black and white. But everything is not black and white because we have a whole color spectrum, right? We have all of
yeah,
these different colors in on the spectrum, and it's good that we can be informed so we can make informed decisions. Now, one of the things that you mentioned is that people understood everything that you were talking about. And I remember years ago, hearing the Prime Minister speaking all up and saying, I can't remember the exact year, but he said, yes, we have a law, but we've never actually done anything. Like we've never actually sent anybody to jail or anything, which is true, which is in fact true. However, what I understand from you is that essentially this law, because I know of people who've been victimized just because they choose to love differently, which has absolutely nothing to do with you. Like how somebody decides to love who because just like I remember when I was growing up, my parents used to tell me, stay out of big people business, right? Stay out of big people business. Today we don't have that. Like it's everybody's business. But when you were growing up and you were told to stay out of the big people business, that required you speaking when your parents were speaking, were having a conversation, probably with them, with each other, or with somebody, a neighbor or a friend. You had to stay out of that. That also required you an access to their bedroom. You couldn't just barge into your parents' bedroom, right? Because that was big. Whatever was going on in there was big people business, right? And if you, for whatever reason, by accident, did, you might even get scolded because it's big people business. It is big people business. And the fact that you have recognized that something that essentially is supposed to be private between two people was criminalized essentially for I want to say centuries because it feels like it's been centuries, but yes, and it's been sitting on our books. So you've taken this up, and it was essentially a victory. It ended in a victory, but I want to kind of scale back a little bit, right, to kind of get a sense on understanding of, could you give us an overview of the current legal landscape regarding LGBTQ plus rights in Dominica? So just an overview of it, kind of, we have the act that was essentially on the books, but I've known of people who've gotten beaten beaten up. I actually had a friend who was beaten up, his clothes taken, his wallet taken, just because, and he wasn't to say walking with him, walking by himself, and just because he appeared to be more flamboyant, that happened. I know of an individual who had a rock thrown at his ear, ruptured his eardrums. I've known of people, women who've been called all kinds of names, because they they appear to be different, they move differently, they choose to love differently, they probably are attracted to the same sex, and it's not so much harsher on women as it is on men. Because again, I think our society hypersexualizes sex as it relates to women and women. So it's like, ooh, women and women, we don't care what they are, but we like it. But the other side, we're just like, we say bandits and bandits, and we're ready to jump up and cause us to. So kind of give us a little overview.
Well, first of all, same-sex loving women in Dominica are celebrated. They are celebrated by men, and men would love to go to bed with two lesbian people.
Yes, they would.
Yeah, as a matter of fact,
It's a fact.
these two men, we have had situations like you say, stoning. But just think that if you're a young man and you're going to school, especially high school, and you're different from the others, and people feel that they have the right to treat you differently, to treat you like you're a second class person, to hit you when they could, and they tell you that you're not man enough. And they call you all kind of different names before you even had your first sexual encounter.
Mhm.
They know it. So it's not a matter that people do not know what they're doing. It's just that people allow them to get away with it. They do it because they're allowed to do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay? And then they grow up and they have their first sexual encounter, or they realize who they're attracted to. And Dominica just gets a very difficult place to live in. So you get people who go to school and they concentrate on what they could concentrate on. And if anything would happen to them in school and they go to the school counselor, you know what the school counselor or principal would tell them? You have to change your ways so that you can fit it. Okay?
So
So they
essentially,
grow up,
you need to become somebody else.
you need to become somebody else. So that stigma just lives with you. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. You
Wow.
grow up, you're being called names before you even know who you are because people see it in you. You get older and then you have to hide who you are. I know a number of people that have committed suicide because they were kind of fighting with their gender. But
And
you wouldn't know
a lot of times they're not necessarily fighting with the community, but even within themselves, because
within
they,
themselves.
they, they're scared of how society will receive them or not. Like in our case, a lot of people. But it's funny though, Daryl, you say that. But I remember like younger when I was growing up, I remember knowing people who would dress differently, right?
Yeah.
And nothing happened to them. Like it seemed like it was a period in time, like you just mind your business, right? Like you literally just mind your business. But it just became a period in time, like I think it was around the 90s, where you just saw a huge spike where anybody who appeared to be different, because I know of people who wore dresses, men wearing dresses. That's how we refer to them. And I mean, I see a couple of them in Dominica even to this day. They're much older now, but you know who they are. You can tell. Oh, they might use little words like you can hear this Marco and that. You hear all of these little terms, and
It
it's only
was not
sometimes.
violent.
It wasn't violent.
It
It
was not
wasn't
violent.
violent.
I mean, in the 70s, Dominica had drag shows. There were
Wow.
queen shows. There were drag shows held in the theaters in Dominica.
Wow.
In the 60s and 50s, all up till the early 70s, they were cross-dressing women, band matador for carnival on a Tuesday
Yes,
afternoon.
they were.
Okay, so it is something that a culture has changed, a community has changed. We are not too sure why it has happened. Everybody has a view of why it happened. I don't care to share it. But we have just become a more intolerant society. And so, to continue what I was first saying, is that that whole thing of people being so intolerant against people. I mean, now we have the LGBTQ community that's up and in front, but there are other things that are happening that are just against people's human rights.
Mhm.
And so we need to educate our community on what are human rights and how do you treat people and where do you
and,
cross the
and that's
line.
where I was leading to. I want you to explain to us, because you say human rights, and you see my show, I like to keep everything simple, stupid. Like say kiss, keep it simple and stupid. All right, we're giving them kisses today so that we can
Yeah,
understand. So it is, the information is available so everyone can understand it, regardless of their level of understanding, whether they went to high school or not. We want to be able to keep it. So talk to us a little bit about what human rights are and how that includes the community that we represent.
first of all, human rights are meant to recognize who people are naturally and ask others to represent who they are, to respect who they are as a natural being.
Mhm.
So it is not forcing anything down your throat. It is not about a moral belief. It is about a human who is acting according to his humanity.
Mhm.
All right? Now you talk about rights and what are rights? Rights are things that you're allowed to do in your community. And laws are things that protect you and the things that you own.
Mhm.
Now, when you put all of those things together, it gives people a protection. It gives people a general understanding of who people, what, how they should treat people because of who they are naturally, and how we should protect them because they're humans living in a society. Now, if you're brought up and you're told that all gay or effeminate people are bad, and you see other people treating them bad, then you start treating them bad. And it's a conditioning that is a conditioning of belief without you having to understand, knowing for sure that it is bad. You just take it up from others because they believe that and they express it to others and they get away with it. That you can do it too without even thinking whether it is right or wrong.
Mhm.
So we now reach a position where we have to start thinking of our actions.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't fight, when if, I should call it fight, if we don't advocate for treating people differently,
Treating people who are different the same.
different, okay, all right, if we advocate to ensure that that happens, and it will continue to happen.
It will.
So when we see something is wrong and we go to the government, we go to the first of all we went to the public. The public told us why they were doing it, and we asked what was the crime. They told us as far as they're concerned, it was against the Bible, and it was because the Bible says so. And we have a law that states that if two people are caught, two same-sex couples are caught having sex, then they will be put in prison for how many years? That made them criminals.
Now, let me ask you, because in the entire court proceeding, there were multiple people who were represented. So, can you share with us a little bit about who essentially, I mean, not the names of the people, but the groups that were represented during the court proceedings?
Okay. There was a claimant, the person who Miriam couldn't bring a case to court like that because Miriam is not a person.
Right.
So we had to bring a claimant.
Right.
So we got a claimant, and the claimant was supported by Miriam.
Yes.
And
So there was a claimant. Then,
well, yes. So the claimant was a gay person who has had a number of things happen to him in his lifetime. Even as far as going to report a rape to the police, and the police not taking it on.
Wow.
The police are will laugh you out the station.
Wow.
Because the way how they treat it is like you just mentioned about somebody who got physically abused because of who they were, and they didn't dare go to the police or complain to anybody because there was that stigma, that shame.
No, a lot of them don't. And it's not necessarily a shame to. It's because they feel like, I know the people that I know who've been victimized, they didn't report it because they didn't think it was going to go anywhere. It wasn't even a matter of, okay, I feel like I'm ashamed, because essentially they've accepted who they are, and they were just like, it doesn't make sense.
I don't think they'll get justice.
Right?
This case that we brought to the court was actually the first case that has ever been reported that a gay man said who they were, and we were challenging you that this was not right and we needed some redress.
Wow.
But we had to do it in a way that we did not say, okay, well, we're here and we're alive and we have to live in this society.
Having you guys as backing definitely helped. Having you guys, because having Meridum as an institution or as an organization back up that individual, not only did you provided a shield, in terms of protecting that person, and I'm also very much willing to protect that person unless that person wants to expose themselves. I'm very willing to protect them. But you also had representation from the church. You also had to share with us some of the other representation.
Because we had Meridum, and opposing that with the churches.
So how many churches you had?
So we had the Dominica Christian Council,
okay,
and the Dominica Evangelical Churches,
okay,
Association, whatever they call them. But anyway, it's that grouping, and the two of them decided that they were coming together. Even if the Catholic Church, through Gabriel Malze, the first letter that we wrote to the public, was asking the Bishop of Dominica to please explain what is the Catholic Church's stance on the incarceration of men because of the same-sex activity.
And what was
if it is in keeping with the Vatican's position at the United Nations, which is a representation of the Holy See, which was stating that you cannot put people in prison because of a sin like that. And the bishop did respond, and he says no, that they were not in favor of the incarceration of men because of some sexual activity. But the church has their laws, and their position is that of the church. But there's
Exactly.
civil law, and civil law is a different thing, and the church does not dictate civil law. All right.
Right.
So there goes that they were justifying their position.
Mm.
And it was clear enough that if we wanted this to change, we had to take it to the courts. Because as far as our Attorney General was concerned, when we met with him in cabinet, is that the law was a deterrent.
Mm.
His exact words. When I asked, well, if we understand what is going on and how people in the community are being treated differently, why don't we change the law? And he told me that the law is a deterrent.
Mm. I want to move over to Joel. And Joel, I want to kind of get a sense of what steps have been taken by Carry Flags in terms of advocacy for decriminalization across the Caribbean,
Right.
and not just necessarily in Dominica. I mean, it was a win for Dominica, but what was the progress, or what has the progress been like, or how much has been made so far?
Right. So now Dominica actually joins a majority of CARICOM countries which have decriminalized same-sex intimacy. So that's great. Dominica's part of that progressive majority. We had countries like the Bahamas who decriminalized through their parliament decades ago.
Wow.
But then the other six countries that have decriminalized, including Dominica, have done so through litigation, like the one Daryl and Miriam led. So we had Belize, and then after Belize, we had Trinidad and Tobago, and the rest of the countries that have decriminalized are basically in the OECS and in the Eastern Caribbean. So you have Barbados, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua, and now Dominica. So I want to congratulate Dominica first of all because the country, Little Dominica, is part of that progressive majority of countries in the region.
Mm-hmm.
Importantly, what we've seen since decriminalization in other places is that it's not a magic bullet. Homophobia and violence and discrimination doesn't immediately end because you've decriminalized. So a huge part of what organizations like Miradom are currently doing is very important. Education, public education, because that's what we need to prevent violence and discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity from occurring in the first place. Because people have those biases and prejudices because they don't know better. And when you educate and you sensitize people that, look, to quote the Caribbean Courts of Justice in a case we had to take all the way there on cross-dressing, um, difference is as natural as breeding, right? People are just different. We're all not the same. We're different races, ethnicities,
Right.
genders, sexualities. We have
Mm-hmm.
different abilities, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. So once we get people to appreciate that, I don't think we'll have that violence and discrimination that you and Daryl were talking about so much anymore. I think two things have been responsible generally in the Caribbean for that culture changing a bit. And a lot of us could refer to, previous times which there seemed to be a lot more social acceptance. One
Well,
is
before you continue, and it's funny you mentioned that, because if I pay attention to, we have Gen X, Millennials, Gen Zs, and what Gen Zs don't care. They're very accepting, right? I feel like it's like the Boomers and the Millennials. The Millennials, they they tend to like like they 1 minute they're in, next minute they're out, they're not sure. And then we have the boomers who are like would have been my mom's age, people in their 50s and their 60s and 70s, who were like, no, it's against the law of God. They go straight, they go straight back to the church. So regardless of what their beliefs are, they go straight back to the church, and that's where they rest their case, right? And I like the fact that you say that it's changing, or it will change, because I see Gen Z's are so much more understanding of, and we don't only see it in North America, we see it in Dominica. where they're a lot more informed about their own sexualities or people's sexualities, or even what is sexuality, or the difference between gender, like things that I am still learning. They are very much more versed in it, right? So I'm glad that you brought that up, Joel. So continue.
Yeah, and you're right. And you know what? You know what is also important, even for the older generation. And I listened to the government's press conference on the case as well. I watched it online, and I think even the government was saying this very clearly. One thing that we have to appreciate in the Caribbean, even though we might describe our countries as being very religious, many places very Christian, is the separation of church and state. We have to understand and appreciate that no society, no matter how religious and Christian you profess to be, can make laws based on religion, right? The
Mhm.
church doesn't get to dictate what the laws of the country says,
Mhm.
right? Because we would probably be doing a lot of barbaric, inhumane things if we were to follow the Bible literally, right? Things to be
Literally, like I like the fact that you said literally, because
literally,
we see people commit crimes, heinous crimes, go to jail and come back out, whereas in the days of the Bible they probably be hung or stoned, right?
right, right, right. And you know, the Bible talks about selling your daughters into slavery and all of that kind of stuff, right? So
Exactly.
um, that really is not the objective basis. And it goes back to what Darrell said about human rights in the beginning. He explained it so simply that I won't attempt to redefine. But I will add also that what's important to recognize about human rights is that the state has these obligations. The state is supposed to protect you, right? So when
Mhm.
you suffer violence, it's the state's machinery in terms of being able to go to the police and make a report, being able to go to court and get justice. All of those obligations are on the state. Now, when Dominica had this law, it was a barrier in of itself. It was an institutional form of homophobia because, like Darrell says, it was already categorizing a group of people as unapprehended criminals. That activity that they basically did in private, in the privacy of their own homes, is criminal. So, really and truly, if the police commissioner woke up last year and decided that they wanted to break into people's homes to see what they're doing in the privacy of their own homes and arrest them on that basis, they could. They could on the basis that the law is there, even though it hasn't been implemented in that way for a long time. But
Mhm.
very importantly, when you have that institutional form of discrimination on the books, it's a barrier to accessing justice. It's a barrier to accessing health services, right? How can you have a law like that on the books and then you don't have how do you protect people from discrimination when a law like that exists? Do you have legislation which says every Dominican is entitled to the full protection of the law, to all their rights, regardless of their sexual orientation and gender identity? That's
Mhm.
the place where we need to move to have that kind of comprehensive legislation in Dominica and the Caribbean, and to also have those protections at the level of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And in other places in the Caribbean, like Barbados, that's where the conversation is at. Barbados has a protection from discrimination act that includes sexual orientation, right? And they decriminalized like a year or two ago before Dominica. And the conversation in Barbados right now is, as part of constitutional reform and then being a new republic, is about should sexual orientation and gender identity be grounds for discrimination in the Constitution? And obviously, we would want that because it would ensure that everybody can access the same constitutional rights without any kind of discrimination.
Okay, so
Well,
I want to.
actually, Joel, we do have some protection within our constitution, and that is section 1 and 10, which we challenge the government on. Because section 14 and 16 of the Sexual Offences Act criminalizes criminalize same-sex intimacy, and section 1 and 10 of the Constitution gives people the rights to freedom of expression.
So it's
So even if
contradicted. It's contradicted.
yeah,
It's
so it was contradicting that, and from since the Constitution is supreme,
Yes.
The judge didn't have a choice but to rule on it, because the government, in their submission to the case, did agree that sections 14 and 16 of the Sexual Offences Act were in contravention to section 1 and 10. So that discussion did not even happen in court when we went to court.
Now, no,
Because
I like to play devil's advocate, okay? Because it
yeah,
will not I will not be Jail Joseph. This will not be the Jail Joseph live show if I'm not able to play devil's advocate. So some folks might say that decriminalizing an act like that encourages more same-sex intimacy, and as a result it reduces the pop it will reduce the population. So this is one concern that people may have. So obviously people might steer away from, and I have to play devil's advocate,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because we hear our prime minister says it all the time: go and make children, go and make babies, our population is decreasing. We hear that all the time. We know population is on the decline, and with more people um, coming together who are same sex, how would reproduction happen, right? So that is a question that people, and I feel like it's a relatively
Fair enough.
fair enough.
I think the issue is, and it's not an issue that's isolated to Dominica. This population is on the decline all over the region, and we get the same thing too from the Barbados Prime Minister, for example. And I think the issue is a huge part of why the population is on decline is because a lot of people are migrating, and the politicians are not sharing that side of the story. In in my country, Guyana, there's probably more people in the diaspora uh, than in the country itself. We probably have a larger diaspora than the population. It's hard to track and measure, but that's the suspicion. So you have to have the pull factors really for people to want to stay there. You have to make um, life affordable. You
Mhm.
have to be able to provide free quality health care, good education, and all of that, and so on, so that Dominicans don't want to migrate to Canada, the US, the UK, and wherever else they're going. So it isn't just about pushing out babies because children are expensive. In the 21st century, it's expensive to raise a family. And we live in a very modern world where you have to educate your children until they get to university. Things have changed. Before, it's just you had just your parental responsibilities was just like, let me support you to go to high school, and then you go get a job and you figure everything out. These are modern times.
Mhm.
Expected that you support your children at least through the first degree, the first college degree. You pay tuition and all of that and so on. So I think it's a shifting of the responsibility really from the governments themselves, which need to create the conditions for people to stay in the Caribbean countries and be able to raise families, affordably. Also say
Mhm.
that treating people equally and fairly and allowing access for different kinds of families, allowing single people to adopt, allowing same sex couples to adopt, um, facilitating, modern families, so to speak, artificial insemination, all of that kind of stuff, and so on. So a lesbian couple can have a child through a surrogate and all of that, and so on. All of that will help to support the population. I don't think that changing a law is going to cause all the straight people to suddenly want to become gay. Very, very clear. LGBTIQ people will always be a minority group, right?
Right,
This will
right.
always be a minority group in this
But
context.
I have to ask
Yeah,
because again, I have to
the
because
answer is
there are
not for you.
many
It's
questions,
the answer
many
is for
questions
viewers.
floating.
Yes,
Right,
the answer is for
right.
viewers.
Many questions are floating around. People have their own ideologies, and sometimes they're not informed properly. So I have to ask the questions, even though most times I have the answer, but I
Yeah.
have to ask the question. So, and that brings me to this question: in what ways do you think that decriminalizing same-sex intimacy would positively impact Dominica's society and even Dominica's culture? Because somebody might say, "Yeah, you're doing this so that it protects people from not getting beat up or kicked," but how does it actually improve or how exactly does it work in terms of or work towards an impact on Dominica's society as well as Dominica's culture?
Well, I'll ask Daryl to speak specifically
Yeah,
to
yes.
Dominica, but I'll share perspectives from what has happened in other Caribbean places that is decriminalized. I think it's the step in the right direction. It's a step in the right direction towards allowing everybody to participate in the economy of their country. Um, Now, the next step will be able to provide protections for discrimination so that regardless of your sexual orientation, your gender identity, you can apply for a job, not face discrimination in that regard, get the job, be entitled to promotion and all the benefits and so on. So you can be the best productive Caribbean person in your country that you can be. Also, I think there's a potential to help boost tourism because one of the things that we know is that LGBT travelers and LGBT tourists have a lot more disposable income. And we know for a fact that one of the concerns that LGBT tourists have about coming to certain Caribbean countries is that these identities and behaviors were criminalized in some places. In fact, the apps that we use in the community, that when you get to a particular place, they will send you a warning and say, hey,
Watch
same
yourself.
yeah, same-sex intimacy is criminalized in Guyana under these laws. Please be aware of that. And we know, and when I was in Dominica there at the end of April, when this decision came out and so on, we met people. We were having lunch at Fort Young Hotel, and somebody saw my radio T-shirt and came up to me and said, "Oh, are you guys from the community? Our best friends are gay and they wanted to come, but they were scared because homosexuality was criminalized here." And we had to say, actually, just on Monday, April 24th, the High Court of Dominica decriminalized same-sex intimacy. So now a lot more people are going to be comfortable coming to explore beautiful Dominica. You are truly the nature isle of the Caribbean. I love it so much. It was my first visit there in April, and I have
And
to
you
come
know
back.
you're coming back.
I have to come. I'm definitely coming back. So I see a step in the right direction where this is going to make a very positive contribution to the economy and to tourism. And if the Dominican Tourism Agency is listening and so on, I think they can do a lot to market Dominica as an LGBTQ friendly tourist destination. Now that we have this decriminalization, a lot of LGBTQ tourists are also interested in nature tourism. But
Yes,
I'll
and
let
because not too few years ago, we had a situation with a cruise ship and people got deported. I mean, granted, there was indecent exposure as well, but there was a situation, and when one thing happens, the media spins it however they want to spin it, and obviously everybody fell in the same pot, and everybody just get cooked, right? But essentially, that this new amendment makes the rest of the world, because I say BBC, a lot of major outlets actually shared it, because it was a historical moment for in the Caribbean. Not to mention what you said about the community and the fact that they have a lot more money. That is facts. I mean, I ain't got poor gay friends. All my gay friends got money, and sometimes I'm like, I mean, I eventually debunked why they have so much money, but they do, because if you have to think, two men in a household making more than a man and a woman would make, right? So, so that essentially makes more sense. Yes, I'm
I need
down.
to add something here. Miradam hasn't finished with what they want, what they have to do with this case. We have been planning to go in to speak with the people at the festivals commissions about announcing to the world that Dominica is now a gay friendly space and trying to invite gay people to our shows. They're the ones who have money, as you said, they can spend, and even the vendors in Dominica who sell to the tourists will tell you that when they get
The gay friends,
gift to pass
they
through,
spend the
they're
money.
very happy when they leave.
They
All right?
spend the money, and they
But at the
tip.
same time,
They
we
tip.
have to be conscious of what they do. Gay people are gay people.
Right.
We know that our community has been a homophobic society, and we just passed a law, and we have to ask them to be respectful. of the Dominicans sensibilities.
Of
So you
course,
don't go walking out on street corners and whatnot.
of
It's
course.
okay to hold hands. It's okay to walk along, but you don't go overboard to try to show yourself.
Right.
And that is what some of those people, some of the people on that cruise ship went to do.
Yes.
They went having sex on their
They went.
balcony.
They went overboard. They
They
definitely went overboard.
agreed with the government to charge them with indecent
And
exposure.
exposure. Yes. Of
All
course, it
right.
was. It was. I mean, but you realize what happened is that it made it a gay thing when it wasn't. It was an
Right.
indecent exposure
Now,
thing.
Regardless of genders, we
Right.
should
gay
just be having
people,
sex in public.
Right.
Whether it's man and
Yes.
man, man and woman, woman and woman.
Yeah.
if gay people, not bisexual, but just lesbians and homosexuals, if they just make up 2% of the society, what is the big thing about we having less children? We're not going to have any less children because traditionally, although people are very silent about it, when people are same-sex loving people and the family has children that they cannot take care of, they take them in and they support them. They bring them up, they adopt them. They
I've seen it
supply them
happen.
with their needs.
I've seen it
It
happen.
happens all the time. But we'll turn a blind eye to it and do as if it never happens.
Mhm.
All right? Bisexual people will always be there. And that doesn't mean that they're going to have less children.
They ain't going nowhere.
I would like to make everybody know that gay people are not lonely. They find the people when they need to find the people.
Facts.
All right? It's just that it's just a little different. And, it is what it is. And we just have to move along with the program.
But it's
No.
it's a situation also too where you have been made to believe that you cannot express yourself. So even even if you were attracted to somebody and they may be attracted to you, they may be less reluctant to come up to you, let's say in a bar, and ask if you'd like a drink, right? They might actually because let me tell you, if there's one person that knows the ins and outs of the gay community, say je suis, especially the one in Dominica, right? I know, and let me tell you, I know the ins and outs because I've supported the community for a very long time, like going way back on my days when I worked at Q95, and I remember, them having situations where they couldn't even have a venue. They didn't feel like going to certain venues to have a party, or even they were scared to approach people to sponsor their events. And I literally stood in the gap and said, I'll check so and so for you, and I'll get so and so to sponsor and whatever. And there were companies that I approached who were like, yes, Jael, we know they love to spend, because they love to spend the money, but it's a fear. They were fearful of actually putting themselves out there where they meet somebody else.
Are you talking about Dominica?
I'm talking about Dominica, bro.
Because the fear is real.
It is
The
real.
fear is real.
It is real.
We have to deal with it. Now, you're always speaking about millennials and all of those different things that. One of the things that Miriam was confident about and still is confident about is that law happened now. But in 20 years' time, it would happen anyway. Because when we speak to young people about how they feel about all of this, they ask, but what is the problem?
They don't understand what is the problem. Like they did not.
What is it? Why do they have something like that? I mean, why are they trying to hold people back? And they will tell you that these are the very laws that make them leave Dominica, because we do have a problem in migration. If they cannot be with their friends and enjoy their surroundings and work in peace and be tolerant and have fun, what is the point of staying? And
they
that's
will
why
go to countries where it's more accepted.
it is more acceptable. And I know people from Dominica who are gay who has left because they just couldn't live in Dominica. They have improved themselves. They have become professionals. They have money. They can come down and buy a house and everything like that. But they're not coming back to live. Now that we have removed the law doesn't necessarily make everything change overnight. It's a culture that has to evolve. And that is what everybody has to work with now. That evolution of that culture, to know that it's okay to be gay, you're human. We will support you just like we support everybody else, and we will stop making you feel uncomfortable in your own space.
Daryl, I want to also ask you about the misconceptions or the myths that people have had about LGBTQ rights, in terms of the decriminalization in Dominica. How do you address those
Right.
myths?
First of all, same-sex intimacy, consensual same-sex intimacy in Dominica has been lifted, is no longer a crime. Just as same-sex, heterosexual sex, consenting heterosexual sex in Dominica is not a crime. So they're now on the same level. So it's not that that is a special thing that happened. No. What has remained, though, that we should always remind people of, is that pedophilia is still against the law.
Period. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that, because people think that a person who is gay is a pedophile. Automatically, that is a misconception that happens a lot, that I know of in Dominica.
And another thing again is that rape is still there. So you cannot go raping a man or raping a woman and having anal sex with them and you think you can get away with it. No, rape is still there.
It's a crime.
And gross indecent exposure is still there.
It's still a crime.
Equally as how it is a crime with heterosexuals. It's just that over the years, especially with the Sexual Offences Act, they have made same-sex intimacy crimes greater.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas you rape someone of the same gender, especially heterosexuals, it is one thing. If it happens within a male and a male, or male and a female, the female being the receiving partner, you get a higher sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it is buggery. All right. Now that is the difference. So I heard them have 2 press conferences and somebody telling people in a very sad, sorrowful face how same-sex intimacy, buggery is still on the books in Dominica and is a serious crime and everything like that. I think we have to be a little more truthful about it. Yes, he didn't lie. It is still a crime.
Mm-hmm.
But the crime lies not with consenting adults. And that is all that we asked for. That is all that we wanted. All right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's just get it clear. That it is not that you cannot commit crimes by doing buggery. You can. But it has to be within pedophilia, rape, and gross indecent exposure.
Thank you very much for that. For dispelling, or for breaking that down for us, Darryl. Darryl,
A little bit on that point.
yes.
I think one of the challenges, and because of this decision, I started reading a lot about Dominica's legislation and Dominica's family law. As I understand it, one of the challenges with sexual offenses in Dominica, and Dara, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't seem like you have a gender-neutral definition of rape. Like
Yes.
in Guyana, what we did in our Sexual Offences Act in 2010 is we defined rape in a gender-neutral way. That does not exist in Dominica. So what the court had to do is still keep certain parts of the buggery offenses and so on to really criminalize anal rape and things like that.
Yeah.
So break that down for us Dominicans who
Yeah.
those of us who might not understand what you mean by a gender neutral.
Well, no definition of rape. I was basically saying that in an ideal world, you would have, or the ideal thing to do when you revisit your sexual offenses legislation is to define that anybody of any gender can commit rape. A
That's
man could commit rape, a woman could commit rape, and it could be committed against any other gender. So a man could rape a man could rape a woman could rape a trans person. A woman could rape a man, a woman could rape a woman could rape a trans
person.
Yeah.
No, here
You
it
also
will.
understand
Once
too
you can
that you also understand too that rape is about violating somebody's body without their consent and so on. So you can use instruments. It doesn't have to be of your own body as well. So what we did in Guyana in 2010 is to create a very modern, comprehensive definition of rape in that way. So it covers everything, and it covers everybody, and it covers every instrument or every kind of way that you could think about that you could possibly violate somebody sexually without their consent. That does not exist in Dominica. So what the court had to do in their decision is to say we can't struck out this entire buggery provision, because they got a part here that says if you penetrate another man or woman without their consent, that is also buggery. That is technically anal rape.
It
But
is
the
rape.
court needed to keep those provisions because nothing else exists that would otherwise rape committed through anal sex without consent.
Okay, I'm glad
No.
we're doing we're covering this. I like the fact that we're covering this, and I also want to note or to add something to this, that men and women have had anal sex forever. I remember when I was actually in high school, my high school days, anal sex was the thing, because there's no way they could find out if you still remained a virgin if it was anal sex, right? So in essentially, if these laws were enforced, it would have had to been enforced with a man and a woman as well,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So I like that you are debunking it in the sense of it is consent. The magic word is consent.
Consent.
And,
Thank you for that.
and I think that exposes us, because Dominicans, we very hypocrite. I'm not gonna lie, we're very hypocrite. Some women in marriages and their husbands are raping them, but they don't realize that it's rape. Because
Yeah.
if I tell you I don't want to, because my stomach might hurt me, I might be coming down with the cramps, I might just not be feeling well, I might be going through emotions and I really don't want to have sex, and you pull on my panty and you push your instruments inside of me, you've raped me,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? And,
Yeah.
and people don't understand that the law essentially speaks and is explicit about consent. So if it's consensual, then there's nobody should be criminalized unless it is between an adult and a child, because a child cannot consent, right?
Correct.
That's
Correct.
where pedophilia comes in.
Correct.
Charlie,
Correct.
All right. Now, Jael, I'm going to jump in there and say something. That was a disappointment that Miriam has. Rather than, okay, we had a case, we lost the case, let us meet together to discuss what the case was all about and what are the pros and cons of what just happened. Then we could bring out the things about the definition of rape in the Constitution and things like that, and we could see how we could smooth out everything. But there's still contention about a court ruling that is about something that is against the Constitution. Nobody's going to roll that back. I don't even think the government is going to challenge it, because it is cut and clear that it is wrong and against people's human rights. But could the government please, those that say that they're in the legal offices and whatnot, meet with groups like Miriam or something like that, to have some discussion, include them in a discussion to, well, let us see what we think of all of this, what comes out of all of this, and how we can improve the situation. It's a disappointment that we haven't had anything like that.
Well, you see, it's not just a marriedom thing. I think it's a societal thing, because women still don't understand what is men in Dominica. A lot of men still don't understand what is consent. Like, to them, consent is not even a word, right? Like, consent. What is consent? I had to literally explain to someone the other day what consent means, right? And that is somebody that is educated, right? Understanding what is consent, and what if I say no and you still think, because they'll say, oh, because you said no but you know you want it. I've heard that, you say no but you say you're not saying no, you say No, there's a different type of no. I've heard so many different conversations about this, and essentially sometimes people are put in positions where they are violated. And that
Yeah.
is violation, right? And you stay in, and that is a form of abuse. You stay in it, you remain in it, and you don't realize that it destroys your character. It makes you less it makes you less self-aware. You lose your confidence as a result of it. It essentially, especially if you a woman and you're an entrepreneur, or you're probably a boss in an office, or or a man, and somebody does that to you, you take away a lot from people. So I like the fact that you guys have been clear, because people have the misconception that this amendment is like the whole of like everything crumbled down, and it's not that serious. And I keep saying, it's not that serious. Essentially what it does is that the laws were amended, so everybody mind your business. It has nothing to do with you. Mind your business. The people
That is that's the
consent.
point. That's the point you started out making, and I thought it was so on. You started out the program by saying this is big people business. So this is about sex between consenting adults, right? The judge was very clear that Dominica's laws allow people, I think, 16 and over, to consent to sexual intercourse with each other. And the decision equalized that for people who want to engage in anal sex, both um, men with each other and men and women. That's essential. So that got decriminalized as well, right? So it was across the board that anal sex as a form of intimacy was decriminalized once it's between two consenting adults. The other thing that I think I picked up from looking a little bit at the media coverage and so on from Dominica is, what does this whole concept of decriminalization mean?
Yes.
Decriminalization is not legalization. So
Right.
let's start there. So what the judge did is basically said, I'm taking out these parts of the law that criminalized this behavior for consenting adults in private, regardless of their genders. And I'm reading down these sections and so on a bit to remove from the legislation these behaviors, these activities as criminal offenses. Now, there's nothing in Dominica's laws that has been done by this court decision to say anything expressly or overtly about homosexuality and transgenderism. So when you hear people talk about homosexuality is now legalized in Dominica, or transgenderism or LGBT rights is legalized, what does that really mean? It's not really technically accurate, because nothing is now in the law that says to anybody, go forth and be a homosexual. Go forth and be a trans person. All the decision simply did is make these particular activities no longer crime. They're no longer crimes. That's what decriminalization means. Decriminalization is not legalization, right? And it's
Right.
really that simple. It's a storm in a teacup issue. And we've seen it other places in the region at first too, that people get worked up for a little while and then they have to move on to the bread and butter issues, right?
Yes, I want to talk about allyship and how much support you guys what sort of support you guys would be asking for. But before I do that, I want to go to the live, because obviously we have people sitting on the live and we want to be able to acknowledge them. When I see long conversations happening with each other, they're having their conversation amongst each other, and our folks have first of all said good night, and people talking about, when we spoke about the Bible, and they were sharing their thoughts and their views, and even sharing about men wearing women's outfits during carnival and all of these different things, things that we've grown up around, and we've known, whether it was implicitly done or explicitly done, we knew, and it was not criminalized then, and nobody went to jail because of it. Antonio Moise is saying drink water and mind your business. What goes on in people's bedrooms is not your business. So that was one of the things that Antonio was adding. Folks were, just saying, Kim Seja was saying, yes, unprovoked. It was a pure hate crime, because they were speaking about a situation that happened in the north of Dominica where somebody was killed because of somebody looked at them the wrong way, and they assumed that the person was trying to try and get with them, which is why when I said, people are scared to even approach each other if they're gay, because you're not sure. A man might watch you, kind of sweet eyes, and you might think it's for real, and you might go and you can proposition the person to find out the person really does not care for gay people, and all of a sudden you end up in a situation where you're undead, right? So folks are sharing their thoughts on that. I see a lot of conversation. Shara was talking about, all the different types of people within the community. Antonio is asking, why is anal rape still described as buggery though? So questions are coming up. Good living, Julius is saying the shit is wrong. Stop finding excuses. Stop nastiness. Bullying case closed. Like sharing his views. So people obviously still remain on either sides of the fence. Jackie is saying exactly no means no, no matter who you are, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. It doesn't matter. It all boils down to consent. So essentially, folks are sharing their views and their thoughts on this new amendment and what it means to them. And obviously, some people are not willing to look past and understand. So, I mean, and we again, what we say, we agree to disagree. Whether you like it or not, it might be your opinion. But obviously, there are a few people that appreciate or are happy with the decriminalization and what it represents for them as an individual. As it relates to allies, how can allies and supporters of the community, as particularly LGBTQ plus rights in Dominica and even around the world, how can they contribute to the advocacy efforts, Joel?
I think that might be a better place to speak to that for Dominica. But one thing for sure, especially for folks in Dominica and folks from the Dominican diaspora watching your program, is I think it's helpful for people to write letters, articles, opinion editorials of support for this decision. And that would be great to see that coming from allies from across Dominican society, from private sector, from public health professionals, from other civil society organizations, not just LGBTIQ people, from the feminist movement, the women's rights movement in Dominica, from other organizations and activists that work with vulnerable populations, whether it be people with disabilities, or people working on other kinds of justice issues, health, climate, all of that. I think this is an intersectional issue, and it would be great to hear voices of support, however people can get their voices heard. And from my week in Dominica, it seems a great avenue for that is the letters, columns, and so on in the local newspapers, and also in the online media. I see there's a lot of, Dominican online media. If people could write those letters of support, I think that would be great. I'm sure Daryl has some specific ways that
Yes.
Miriam could be.
Daryl knows.
The first thing I would ask people to do, start having conversations around it. Start talking about sexual differences within the community and how it affects people's lives, and speak a little more positively about it. It is impossible for the few people that are advocates of the rights in Dominica to reach out to everybody individually. But those who say that they're allies, bring up the conversation when they can with their peers, and just find out what their views are and try to explain to them what is really happening. That is the way I think that allies who do not want to come out in the open and say, yes, I'm an ally to that, could address the situation quietly, calmly, but effectively. A culture is cultivated, you cultivate that sense of respect for human rights through that kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that Miriam has looked at is that now that we have the judgment, what is next? Because we have spent the last 10 years fighting, advocating for the liberation of a community, an
Mm-hmm.
LGBT community who have been discriminated about. Now we're going to have to change that narrative and we're going to have to see how we can reach out to the community. But do we know what the community wants? Do we know where they want to go to? Have we assessed the general feelings of the public on this and how is best to move forward? So we have decided that we're going to recapitulate, we're going to see what the matter is. We are going to do some surveys within our own selves to find out how do people feel about it, what is the government's position? Because now that has changed, the government's position would have to change. And what is the gender policy state about that? What does the Ministry of Health policy say about that? What does the Ministry of Education say about that? And we'll bring it together to try to create a document of things that we should work on.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than just shooting from the hip, we're trying to do it scientifically by getting people's views and then to present something to them.
Wow.
Okay.
That is really good to know. Looking ahead, what sort of steps, or in terms of, you mentioned some, but in terms of advocacy in Dominica, but how can individuals and organizations continue to support and promote equality and inclusion? I mean, we spoke about letters, we spoke about all of these different things, but I think in general, it's an equality and inclusion thing. Like
Yeah.
it's not even like, because I don't understand how people don't like gay people. Like, they're some of my favorite people. They're so real. Like, that's just my opinion. They're so real. And when they ride for you, they ride for you. Okay. So I don't even understand. But I kind of want to get a sense of how can organizations continue to support and promote equality and inclusion in your community.
Talking about it, looking at their policies, for creating programs where they could discuss it. It's not a matter of Miriam having to tell them. They
Mhm,
have to probably move forward and take the initiative to do those things.
mhm,
But I will bring up another thing that we are not talking about. The LGBT community has been held back for so long that they have grown accustomed of being second-class citizens and can't express their sexuality.
So there's a fear, and they'll
This is
and the fear will has caused trauma, and the trauma will probably, so there needs to be a level of
It's
healing now,
important to get them to come out, to accept who they are, and to move forward.
so they can heal. Like, I think it's more less than moving forward and more healing,
It's a
because
healing. It's a healing, but I don't want to be so scientific and philosophical about it. But they just have to accept themselves for who they are
Mhm.
and present a positive front to the community and tell them, okay, but that's who I am, and now so what?
Mhm.
Yeah. I wanna
People
add
try to bully them because they're afraid. Well, now they're not afraid anymore because they have accepted who they are. Ask them, so what?
Okay.
yeah,
Let's move on with the program.
yeah. I want to add two things for
Okay? Until the
organizations.
community is ready to do that, it's difficult to create programs for them if they're not willing to accept themselves.
Very true. Very, very true. Yes, Joel.
Yeah, for organizations, to answer your question, Jael, for organizations that are allies, I think to look at the issue of inclusion whenever you are doing consultations, you're working in communities, you're working with vulnerable groups, to look around and make sure that you have a seat at the table for LGBTIQ Dominicans.
And that's
Uh,
what I was kind of asking, because,
yeah,
for example, we're going into the hurricane season. There are hurricane shelters. Are the shelters inclusive?
right. And not only that, a Miridom member has done some PhD research about how LGBT Dominicans face discrimination in evacuation processes in times of environmental emergencies and so on. So I think there's a real opportunity there with this freshly minted PhD thesis to look at issues of inclusion around, disaster preparedness and responding to emergencies. So when it comes to issues, that's why I said this is an intersectional issue. And if you are truly an ally, you will be inclusive in every way. You're having a conversation about climate. LGBTQ people part of the conversation. Is Miriam at the table? Is the Dominica Equality Association at the table? Uh, and so on. Even if you're going into communities and you're trying to get a representative sample because you're consulting people who have got views, you often tell us, oh, we have to get men, we have to get women, we have to get persons with disabilities, and so forth and so on. Are you ensuring as well that LGBTQ people are at the table? Now, in a small island context, not everybody's going to say, hey, I'm gay or whatever, right? Somebody might use the label youth advocate, youth activist, and so on, but they might quietly share with their allies who they are.
But
That level of inclusion is also important.
adding to this, Joel, is that the worst thing Miriam can do is go to try to negotiate or advocate with people without information, without empirical information. So we have to collect that information so that we go to them and start negotiating. Start negotiating our way through. All right? Start talking to people and tell them, okay, we have this problem, but we can solve this problem if we could do this, 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 and this. How can you help us in achieving that? But rather than just shooting from the hip, we decide that as I mentioned to you, we're just stepping back, look at the situations, and when we step forward with our new strategy for advocacy, that it will be to get the community to be on sync with the LGBT for acceptance.
Right.
But again, I think is most important. LGBT people must begin to accept themselves. Miriam cannot help them there.
Right.
Miriam
I think
can
there's a
represent for them, not-
yeah. I think there's a role for everybody to play, and Daryl is completely right that the LGBTIQ population, and this is not just in Dominica, but all across the Caribbean, we've seen this because of a history of marginalization, discrimination, socioeconomic disadvantage, and so on. Governments and states now have to take steps to bring greater equality and equity to these groups who have been historically marginalized. The Americans call it affirmative action, particularly in the context of race and civil rights issues. But very simply, it means we have to recognize that because a particular group faced so much discrimination, we have to do more to ensure that their right to work is fully realized. So we have programs where we're training people for entrepreneurship, for small businesses, and so on. We have to make an extra effort to reach out and make sure LGBTQ Dominicans are included. So when the ministries have these programs and so on, they need to write to Miriam and said, do you have any entrepreneurs in your community and so on who can benefit from this? We're doing a training for small businesses, micro enterprises. We're giving out grants for people who are doing tourism businesses, tourism products, and so on.
Other anybody.
Yeah, you have to have that kind of inclusion because unlike North America, where you talk about LGBTIQ people, the pink dollar, they call it the pink dollar in international economics and so on. We don't have it in the Caribbean because of this long history of marginalization and so on. So we also have to empower LGBTIQ people economically, and there's a role for the state to play there. So I think there's steps that I mentioned, some of them at the policy level, where you're going to have to look at the gender policy, the health policy when it comes to HIV and non-discrimination, education policies to ensure that issues related to bullying in schools, nobody's bullied because of their sexual orientation and gender identity and all of that and so on. But to really make those policies actionable, you're going to have initiatives which are aimed at being inclusive, at kind of propelling LGBTIQ people. So you have to lift the community from where they are because they're starting on the back foot, so to speak.
Get
Yeah,
traumatized. Get
very true.
traumatized.
Very true. My final question is, how do you envision this ruling shaping future legal and societal attitudes towards the community and its rights in Dominica, and probably potentially even influencing other Caribbean nations?
Interesting question. This case brings to fore the whole thing of human rights. And that is why Miriam has been asking through the United Nations for Dominica to form a human rights council that would be able to sit and discuss and have discourse with the public on the various human rights um, imbalances within the community or within the society, Dominican society, and could advise the government accordingly. Because we think that this thing is just about LGBT rights. No, it's not just about LGBT rights.
Mhm.
We speak about the rights to
It's minority rights because they're indigenous people. There are,
yeah,
there are a lot of
people,
different
there are
minority
people with different
groups.
religious beliefs
Yes, yes.
and all kind of differences that really doesn't affect anybody, but because we are not accustomed with it, we feel that they have no rights or they
Hmm.
shouldn't be doing it. And a
And we've
lot of
treated
it
them as
is
less than for years and for centuries, for decades.
okay. And so, because we have been doing it for so long, we think that it's okay. No, we need a set of people to sit, discuss those things, and bring it out to the government so that the government can now sit and say, okay, well, we have got this advisory from the people. Are they making sense or are they not making sense? Should we bring the society, the community, the society so they could discuss it or not? But when a government comes and you're trying to negotiate with them and in the middle of negotiating, or trying to meet with them for you to discuss what that movement for the liberation of the LGBT people, LGBTQ people in Dominica is all about. And then they take it and it becomes a sensation thing, and they go and at a press conference they say it will not happen under our watch.
I
What does
know.
that mean to my community? Okay, as if we
Mhm.
have to be a little sensitized about that and get people to speak about it. And being in a small community like Dominica, that is not exactly a university um, country, there are few people with a higher education. People just seem to just make comments to just walk over people, and because they're not talking about it, then they feel that they're right.
Hmm.
And in essence, that is really bullying people because of their ignorance. And we need to sit and we need to deal with some of those matters, some of those aspects. I would like to think that it's LGBT people alone have that is happening too, but I'm afraid it's going to raise its head in different places. So we
Anything
need
you want to say? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and at the regional level,
yeah.
at Carry Flags, the entire Caribbean, because like Dominica just became the seventh of 12 countries that had these laws to decriminalize, right? There's five more to go, and it's going to happen. We should be getting a decision from St. Lucia anytime now, for instance, right? They've also been to court a few years ago. So the region is already having a conversation about what happens after decriminalization, because this is only the first step. And we talked about it a little bit earlier. Um, we need comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation that protects people from bias, violence, and discrimination. So we need laws which say you have all full access to all of your human rights, your political rights, your civil rights, your economic, social, and cultural rights, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, your gender, your sexual orientation, your disability, your health status, comprehensive legislation. Um, that is very much needed for many countries in the Caribbean, including my own country, Ghana, doesn't have that. We
Hmm.
need constitutional protection from discrimination. Almost every Caribbean country I could think of, there's a non-discrimination clause in the Constitution. Um, Nowhere in the region has sexual orientation and gender identity as grounds for discrimination in their constitution as yet. I should say nowhere in the English-speaking Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean region has that as yet. So that is part of what the Caribbean regional movement is discussing in terms of the laws and policies that we want to change, because our goal is really to prevent hate crimes from happening in the first place. We mustn't just, we must get to a place where that doesn't happen. Nobody must get attacked because they're gay or they're trans. We must get to a place where people can apply for a job and not face discrimination because of their sexuality or gender. They could go into a public health clinic and get treatment and service just like a cisgender heterosexual person. So that's what those laws and policies are about. And I think it's a regional conversation that's happening. It's part of a regional effort. Dominica is part of it. And I know the immediate focus for Miridom and the other local groups is on education and changing hearts and minds. But the important thing that about this decision and why it's a step in the right direction, it now sets the tone for future generations as well. So young Dominicans will now grow up in a country where the law doesn't criminalize a certain group of people. That in itself should shape their perspective.
Yeah.
You can't underestimate the effect of an institutional form of homophobia like that. In my own country, when we talk about these issues and so on, and when people can't argue with you anymore from a human rights perspective, they will say, oh, well, at the end of the day, it's illegal. It's a crime to engage in that kind of behavior. And they're right. Technically, factually, they're right? So that in itself is a huge barrier that has been removed, and it positions the country to take great steps for equality inclusion, like by having comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation and also constitutional protection, so everybody can access their rights. What Darrell spoke about in terms of recommendations of having like a Dominica Human Rights Council and so on, in my own country, Guyana, we have constitutional commissions. I don't know if that exists in Dominica, but we have commissions set up by our parliament on women and gender issues. There's one on indigenous peoples issues. There's another one on ethnicity called the Ethnic Relations Commission. A small place like Dominica might not need that many, 70,000 people, maybe one general human rights commission that is a creature of your constitution, and it reports to parliament to address all of these issues from a broad human rights based and intersectional approach. And I think that would take Dominica forward and make it a place where everybody wants to live, work, travel, do business, and raise a family.
Wow. I don't think did we leave any stone unturned? we any stone left unturned?
We did a lot for a short piece of time.
We did a lot. We did a lot, and I must say I'm very appreciative of the both of you for coming on and speaking with us and sharing with us. I particularly I'm happy that Joel could have joined, because Darrell, like you rightfully know, you strength is better in numbers. When you, especially when you have somebody who's been doing this work for quite some time, and you're not new to the work, but you're new to this kind of victory, and what it means for your organization and moving forward in terms of what the expectations are. Joel has lived it. I've seen it and experiences it all the time, and it's really good to see that there is collaboration between the organizations in terms of helping people to understand. And I hope to see a lot more communication material coming out from Dominica as it relates to LGBTQ rights, as it relates to trying to get rid of the discrimination that people face, how it's dealt with, and really see like good examples, like best practices in terms of how the community is treated moving forward. I really look forward to seeing that, and I don't want to hear them kind of stories anymore about people getting stoned and kind of thing. That not making no sense.
Yeah, and murdered. Unnecessary.
And Miridom is going to put itself in a position that if anybody is physically or unduly verbally abused, check us out. We'll help you. Because we have to make a few examples within the society so people would know that they cannot cross some lines.
Yeah.
I also want to just mention that
I would say you can't cross my.
everywhere I go to in Rosenau, people are congratulating me. Oh boy, y'all win. Good for y'all. It is not y'all that won, it's we won.
Yeah.
Dominica.
Because the law is not just changed for me and some other people at the back.
For
The law
children,
has
your children. Some of y'all have children.
your friends, your children, your family, your every. It
Some
changed
of
for us.
y'all have children, and you don't even know what your kids be doing. Let me tell you. Let me tell you. I know of one specific person who was very anti and had to get a nice little sit down, because it was happening right underneath their roof. In terms of, you don't know, because you don't know what tomorrow is going to be. You don't know who your children are going to grow up to be. You don't know what sort of, a lot of them are holding back because obviously they fear certain things. They've heard you say certain things as an adult. They're not sure how you feel when you say ban this and ban that. It creates a fear, right? In approaching you, in being themselves, and then it makes life a bit more livable, and your children can understand you, and it is really essentially a win for all, because most of us have children, and some of us who don't have children have cousins and family members and relatives who would probably go through similar situations, and who wants to walk through life feeling like they cannot be themselves. They cannot, we hear people saying authentically, be authentically yourself. What is authenticity if you cannot truly walk around and be okay with your sexuality? What exactly is authenticity? What does it mean to be authentic, right? So thank you very much to the both of you. I wanna give you guys the final floor, the final word. So I will let Joel go first, and then Daryl, because obviously Dominica will go second. So Joel, your final.
Yeah, final thoughts. Jael, thank you so much for having us on the program. We're really happy to share and to share our vision for a Caribbean that is inclusive, and to show that really it's that Caribbean people that are doing this work. There's a perception that LGBTQ rights are something foreign, Western, imposed, but the regional movement has been budding, and Carrie Flags itself started since the late 90s under a different name. At the time, it was called Sea Flag, a much shorter name. And I think we were grateful for this opportunity to as well to support our member organizations in Dominica, like Miridom and the Dominica Equality Association in this quest. And we're going to continue to do that and to support the work going forward in Dominica as a sister Caribbean country and as a part of the Caribbean and part of CARICOM as well. So thank you very much for having us, and thank you for that.
You're most welcome, Joel. And finally, Daryl.
Yes, well, thank you for having us. I'm really pleased to be on your program.
I'm happy you
Please
came.
in the sense that we could sit down and we could actually have a discussion about this. And it's not very often that I get to have somebody interview me and have a discussion about it instead of just getting my views so that I could get a clip for tomorrow's news program. So I'm really happy for that. And also, Miradam had this program, Rights, Laws, Beliefs, where we went out and we tried to do programs in different community groups on what are rights, what are laws, what are beliefs, and how they come together to create a harmonious society.
Mhm.
We are trying to repeat this program, and if people want to find out a little more about it, they could join in with our programs because we're going to offer it to different groups around the island, whether it be youth groups, community groups, executives, and people like that who take decisions, just for them to understand what are the rights, what are laws, what are beliefs, and how you can use them as a guide to take better decisions on how you treat people. Dominica is now a better place, a more human rights friendly place because this law has been lifted. And it's not because of Daryl, Philip, or anything like that, but it is because of all of us. Some people expressed their views. Some people said it was because of the Bible. Some people didn't want to see people or talk to people. But all of this is part of community expression, but it's the way that we treat each other that makes a difference.
That's right.
So if you want to kill each
That's
other for
right.
differences, then the whole world will be blind and toothless. Eye for an eye, tooth for tooth.
That's
We need
true.
to sit down, hear differences and be able to talk to people instead of talking at people. That's it.
Wow, this was beautiful. I want to say thank you again to the both of you and thank you for your kind words. Thank you to the both of you for coming out and sharing with us, taking time out of your schedule and coming to talk to us about things. I feel these things matter. I think it matters to my audience. I feel it's very important to be inclusive. I think it's very, and I saw, some people earlier on talking about thank you for, bringing inclusive programming. I think it's very important to be inclusive. And because people, nobody wants to feel like an outsider, and I want everybody on my timeline to feel like they're included in the Jael Joseph business. All right. So I want to say thank you very much to y'all, to both of you for coming on and sharing with us. And I know a lot of us learned new things. A lot of us heard things that we've never heard before. Some of us feel a sense of, oh, I understand it better, and it's not. And I saw some people based on the interactions on the live. I saw some people started off as question, 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 and now they're like, oh, very interesting discussion, or very nice or very true, because they've now understood, what it is and how it affects them. Actually, it doesn't even affect you if you have nothing to do with it, right? It's none of your business if it doesn't have anything to do with you. But at least you are able to understand, better what the law, the, the decriminalization of the same sex intimacy law was all about, and why it's important for people, especially in minority groups that have been affected for some time. Thank you again, guys, for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone.
Bye. All right, guys, that's it. That's it. Thank you very much to every single one of you who tuned in there and far. I truly appreciate you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the program. I hope you shared with a friend. Some of you might be scared to still share it publicly because you don't want people to think, oh, but Jay, I believe in this because, again, we sensitive. We sensitive about what we believe in. We sensitive about how people see us, how people view us. Especially sometimes we've made comments that we probably regret that we've made, and we're not really ready to, accept that, hey, we might have been at fault, and we should probably change our ways. But you can share it with a friend. You can share the link privately with a friend. You can also share the YouTube link. You can share the link on X. You can share it on LinkedIn, and share it with somebody that you feel you might have had a conversation with them, and their understanding of the act might have been flawed. Their understanding of the laws as it relates to Dominica might have been questionable, or they might still be in a phase of understanding what is all of this going on, right? And I like us to have enough information so we can genuinely make a decision that will benefit us and benefit the people around us. I want to say thank you very much to every single one of you who tuned in. I really love you guys. Thank you very much for your support. I really truly honor, and love, especially the top fans that come on every single time I tune in. You come on. I'm having a surprise show this week, but you gotta make sure you stay locked in. I'm gonna have a surprise show this week. We have a surprise show coming on your way, and I want to say stay tuned and you'll see who the surprise guest is. So make sure you stay locked on. You stay locked on to my updates, my stories. Just stay crazy glued for the guest that we're going to be having, the surprise guest we're going to be having right here on the Jael Joseph live show. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
I love the Kalinago territory, I love the Kalinago people, and I really embrace my culture.
How the hell do we expect to survive as a communal society in a capitalist system.
We need to teach that history that have not been taught.